I never imagined that losing my grandmother would tear my family apart more than her actual passing did. My name is Rachel, and I was closer to my grandma than anyone else in the world. She basically raised me. My mom died when I was 9, and after that, my dad became emotionally distant, like a shell of himself. But Grandma stepped in. She cooked for me, helped with schoolwork, sat beside me when I cried after nightmares. She even came to every school recital and science fair. She was my home. When she passed, I was devastated. I stayed by her bedside during her final days in hospice, holding her hand, whispering stories, playing her favorite music. And even though she slipped into unconsciousness near the end, I believe she knew I was there. She squeezed my hand once, right before the machine started beeping. So when the will reading was scheduled 2 weeks after the funeral, I wasn't thinking about money or possessions. I just wanted closure. But my aunt, my late mom's younger sister, Darlene, came with an agenda. She wore a crisp, black pantsuit, sat stiffly in the attorney's office like she was at a job interview, and barely even looked at me. I hadn't seen her cry at the funeral, and I hadn't heard from her once while Grandma was sick. She lived just 2 towns over, but barely visited. The lawyer began reading the will. Grandma had left small items, trinkets and jewelry, to other extended family members. A few donations to charities she loved. But then came the bombshell. To my granddaughter, Rachel, I leave my house, my savings account, and all family heirlooms, including the antique piano, china collection, and photo albums. She was my heart, my joy, and the one who never left my side. I was stunned. Tears welled up in my eyes, not because of the inheritance, but because those words confirmed what I had always felt, that Grandma saw me. Truly saw me. Darlene, however, was livid. She stood up before the lawyer even finished. "She must have been manipulated," she said sharply, glaring at me. "This isn't right. I'm her daughter. That house should be mine. That china belonged to our great-grandmother. It's not yours." The lawyer calmly explained that the will was legally sound, that it had been signed, notarized, and witnessed 6 months before Grandma passed. But Darlene wouldn't back down. She was old and confused, she snapped. Rachel probably put her up to this. She's not even a real adult yet. How can she be trusted to keep that house in order? I was shaking. I wanted to speak up, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't believe this was happening. This woman, who hadn't visited Grandma in months, who didn't even call her on holidays, suddenly believed she deserved everything. After the meeting, she cornered me in the hallway. "You're not keeping that house," she hissed. "I'll fight you if I have to. That property is in our family, not yours." I stood there in silence, heart pounding, while she stormed off. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've received 2 certified letters from her lawyer asking me to renegotiate the terms of the estate, as if I had any power over what Grandma chose to do. My voicemail is full of angry messages from distant cousins I barely know, calling me selfish and disrespectful to bloodlines. I feel like I'm drowning in guilt, even though I didn't do anything wrong. But now, Darlene has filed a formal challenge in probate court. She's really trying to take everything from me. I tried to ignore the legal notice at first. I stared at the crisp envelope on my kitchen table, hoping it would just go away. But of course it didn't. My Aunt Darlene was serious. She filed an official motion to contest the will, claiming undue influence, mental incompetence, and improper pressure from me. I was in disbelief. I barely knew how to read legal paperwork, let alone respond to it. So I hired a probate attorney using part of the money Grandma left me, which, of course, made me feel even guiltier, like I was somehow defending myself using what my aunt thought should have been hers. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of it. And as if the court case wasn't enough, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. One of Darlene's grown sons, my cousin Greg, messaged me on Facebook. "You're a snake. You took advantage of an old woman. You're a thief with a pretty face." Another cousin commented on one of my Instagram photos. "Shame on you for dividing the family. Hope you're happy living in someone else's house." I almost deleted all my accounts that night. The worst part, my dad, Grandma's son-in-law, was staying silent. He told me he didn't want to get in the middle, but it felt like I was completely alone, until I opened the cedar chest in Grandma's bedroom. I hadn't been able to go through her things after she died. The grief was too raw. But after the second letter from Darlene's lawyer arrived, I needed something, some sort of clarity or strength. That's when I found Grandma's journal. It was thick, leather-bound, and dusty, tucked between old scarves and her favorite perfume bottle. I sat on the bed and started reading. She'd been writing in it for over 15 years. There were pages about me, how proud she was when I graduated, how much she loved our movie nights, how scared she was when I got pneumonia at 16. But then I saw an entry dated about a year ago. Darlene called today. First time in months. She wanted money. Again. I told her no. She hung up on me. I don't think she even remembers my birthday anymore. Another entry from a few months later. Rachel brought over soup and folded my laundry. Darlene hasn't visited since Easter. I hate how people show up only when they want something. Rachel never asks. She just loves me. I couldn't stop crying. There were dozens of pages like that. Grandma wasn't confused. She wasn't manipulated. She made her choices knowing exactly what she was doing. And she wrote them down with dates, feelings, and clear memories. I scanned several pages and sent them to my lawyer the next morning. She called me 30 minutes later. Rachel, this journal is gold. It could completely destroy your aunt's claim, especially since it's handwritten and dated. For the first time since Grandma's death, I felt something other than grief and fear. I felt protected, but the peace didn't last long. The next week, someone broke into the house. They didn't take anything valuable. The TV, laptop, jewelry were untouched. But my bedroom drawers were ransacked. The box where I'd stored the journal? Gone. Just gone. The break-in was like something out of a movie, except it was my life. And it felt personal. Too personal. The front door was still locked. No broken windows. No signs of forced entry. But my bedroom door, the lock was completely shattered. My drawers were torn open, clothes everywhere, and that small wooden box, the one where I'd put Grandma's journal, was missing. It didn't feel like a robbery. It felt like a message. I called the police, hands trembling as I described what happened. They took a report, dusted for prints, and asked if anything valuable had been taken. Only something that mattered to me, I said. I couldn't even begin to explain the journal to the officer. How much it meant, how it proved everything, how I had planned to use it in court. I just kept repeating, it's gone. It's just gone. When they left, I collapsed on the couch, mind spinning. Who would do this? My gut screamed Darlene. But there was no proof. At least not yet. 2 days later, while pacing my living room with a mug of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink, I remembered something. The old security camera. Grandma had installed a tiny one on the front porch years ago after a neighbor had packages stolen. I had totally forgotten about it. I pulled up the app on my phone and scrolled through the footage from the night of the break-in. There was nothing from the front door, no movement, no one entering. But then, something weird. At 3:14 a.m., a shape emerged from the side gate, a figure in a hoodie and jeans, moving quickly toward the back of the house. They disappeared off-screen, then reappeared 8 minutes later, holding something rectangular in their hands. Maybe a book? A box. They looked up directly at the camera for a split second. I froze. Even with the low light and grainy resolution, I recognized the jawline. The nose. It was Greg, my cousin, Darlene's son. I recorded the clip and sent it to my lawyer, who immediately involved the police again. A few hours later, I got a knock at the door. 2 officers, serious and direct. "We have reason to believe this was a targeted theft," one said. "And since you have footage of a known relative, we're opening a formal investigation." I nodded silently, heart pounding. Later that night, I got a text. From Greg. "You're making a mistake, Rachel. That journal was poison. You should have let it burn with her." I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. "I have it backed up. You didn't destroy anything. But thank you for confirming you took it." It was a lie. I hadn't backed up every page. Only a few scans I sent to my lawyer. But I needed to rattle him. And it worked. He didn't reply. The next morning, Darlene called me for the first time in over a month. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Rachel," she said, "this has gone too far. All this fighting. Over what? A few heirlooms. Let's just settle this. Quietly. No lawyers." I almost laughed. Now she wanted peace. You mean now that the journal's gone? I asked. There was a pause. Then she said, You don't want to drag the family name through court, do you? Think of your mother. What would she say? My stomach turned. She'd say I deserve to be treated like her daughter, I said. Not a threat to your entitlement. And then I hung up. I'm done playing nice. My lawyer is preparing to submit the surveillance footage and screenshots of Greg's text to the court. We're pushing forward with everything. And yesterday, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a burned corner of Grandma's journal. Just one page, half melted, but the words still legible. I know Darlene will try to take what she can after I'm gone. I just pray Rachel is strong enough to stop her. The day of the court hearing, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd barely slept the night before. The footage of Greg, the journal page, the text messages, they all replayed in my head like a broken loop. But this was it. I was about to face Darlene across a courtroom, with strangers deciding whether my grandmother's last wishes would be honored or rewritten. The courthouse smelled like old paper and coffee. I sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom with my lawyer, who tapped calmly on her tablet. I tried to focus on breathing, not passing out. Then I saw her. Darlene swept into the hallway like she owned the place. She wore a black blazer, pearl earrings, and that smug expression I knew all too well. Behind her was Greg, trying to look respectable in a suit that didn't quite fit. He avoided my eyes. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than the hallway. The judge, a serious woman in her 60s, sat behind the bench, flipping through the case file. Darlene's lawyer stood and began with a rehearsed professional voice. Your Honor, my client, Miss Darlene Avery, believes that the will in question was the result of manipulation. The decedent, Margaret Avery, was elderly and vulnerable. Her granddaughter, Miss Rachel Hart, inserted herself into Margaret's life in her final years and pressured her into changing the will in her favor. I nearly laughed out loud. Inserted myself. I'd lived with Grandma. I'd been her caregiver, her friend, her emotional support when Darlene couldn't even be bothered to call. My lawyer stood up, completely composed. We intend to prove that Margaret Avery was of sound mind and made her decisions deliberately and consistently, both in legal documents and in her own private writings. Furthermore, we have reason to believe the opposing party attempted to destroy key evidence. The judge raised an eyebrow, and just like that, the game began. We submitted everything. The scanned pages from the journal, the text from Greg, the surveillance footage. Darlene's lawyer objected at nearly every turn, claiming the footage was too grainy, the journal unverified, the texts out of context. Then my lawyer dropped the big one. We'd like to request testimony from one of Ms. Avery's former caregivers, someone who saw Rachel and Margaret together on a weekly basis during her final year. A woman named Letitia took the stand. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She looked right at the judge and said, Margaret adored Rachel. She told me every Thursday morning how lucky she felt to have her. And she told me, directly, that she didn't trust Darlene, that she was tired of being used. Darlene shifted uncomfortably in her seat. And then, the twist. Letitia pulled out a small envelope from her bag. Margaret gave me this, she said. She told me to hold on to it. Said it was in case things got ugly. I didn't know what she meant, but I think now. I do. Inside the envelope was a letter, written by Grandma. To whomever finds this, I want to be clear. I changed my will because I finally saw people for who they really were. Rachel has been my light, Darlene my shame. I hope this helps make things right. The courtroom was dead silent. Darlene's lawyer scrambled to object. Greg stood up suddenly and muttered, "This is ridiculous," under his breath. The judge banged her gavel and demanded order. And then she asked Darlene directly, "Miss Avery, did you or your son enter Ms. Hart's property on the night of July 4th?" Darlene looked stunned. I don't know what you mean. Of course not. But Greg, he wouldn't even look up. The judge stared at both of them for a long moment, then said, "I'll be reviewing the evidence thoroughly before making my ruling. But let me be very clear, tampering with or destroying evidence is a criminal offense." The hearing ended shortly after. Outside, Darlene brushed past me with a glare that could have cut glass. Greg trailed behind her like a scolded child. But as I stood on the courthouse steps, something shifted in me. For the first time since Grandma died, I felt like I was standing up not just for her, but for myself. And maybe, just maybe, I was winning. The court hearing rattled Darlene more than she let on, and I could feel it. A few days later, my lawyer forwarded me a file she just received from an anonymous tipster. At first, I assumed it was junk. But as I clicked through the attachments, my jaw dropped. Bank statements, credit reports, property liens, all in Darlene's name. Turns out, my dear aunt was deep in debt. She had borrowed against her home 3 separate times. She owed money to 3 different creditors and had recently defaulted on a massive loan. I suddenly understood why she was so obsessed with Grandma's estate. It wasn't about sentiment. It was about survival. She needed the inheritance to stay afloat. I sent the file to my lawyer immediately. She smiled grimly when she saw it. This gives us motive. Strong motive. But that wasn't even the wildest part. Along with the financial documents, there was a scanned letter. Not from my lawyer. Not from Letitia. From someone named Thomas Keller. I didn't recognize the name at first. But when I opened the PDF, I gasped. The letter was handwritten, faded, and addressed to Grandma Margaret. Dear Margaret, I know you'll never forgive me for what happened. But I want you to know, the truth was never meant to stay buried. Darlene lied to you, about me, about everything. She was protecting herself. If Rachel ever finds this letter, tell her I'm sorry for staying away. I thought I was doing the right thing. My hands trembled as I read it. Thomas Keller was my biological grandfather. Grandma had never spoken about him. Not once. As far as I knew, he left when my mom was still a child. But here he was, confirming something I'd always felt, that there were layers to this family I'd never understood. We found Thomas through an old address listed on the envelope. He was alive, living in Oregon, 82, a little frail, but sharp. When I called him, his voice cracked when he heard my name. I've waited years for this, he said. A week later, we met over Zoom with my lawyer present. He confirmed everything, that Darlene had hidden letters he sent Grandma, that she intercepted phone calls, that when Grandma tried to reconnect with him later in life, Darlene told her he died. I was stunned. So was my lawyer. Thomas offered to testify, but we knew just the letter, and his sworn affidavit would be enough. And then, just when I thought we'd uncovered everything, I got a knock on the door. It was my neighbor, Joan. Sweet, nosy Joan. She handed me a plastic bag. I found this in my garden shed, she said. I think it's yours. Greg must have panicked and tossed it over the fence. Inside the bag was Grandma's journal, intact, water damaged but readable. I opened to the last entry. If you're reading this, Rachel, I want you to know I see you. Ich chose you, not out of obligation, but out of love. Don't let anyone tell you what you deserve. You know the truth. I broke down crying. Everything I needed, everything I feared I'd lost, had come back to me. We submitted the journal as final evidence. Court reconvened in 3 days, and I was finally ready. The second time I stepped into that courtroom, I felt different. I wasn't nervous anymore. I wasn't angry. I was steady. This time, I had the truth on my side in black and white. The journal, the financial documents, the letter from my grandfather, even Greg's weak apology over text. It all pointed to one conclusion. Darlene hadn't just been wrong. She had tried to erase me. The judge returned after 3 days of deliberation. She walked in with a folder, sat down quietly, and spoke without any dramatics. I've reviewed all submitted evidence, including the sworn affidavits, physical documents, and the final pages of the decedent's journal. I find no evidence of coercion on Miss Hart's part. Quite the opposite. I find consistent proof that Margaret Avery acted out of her own volition, and that her granddaughter, Rachel Hart, was the intended heir. Darlene flinched. Greg slumped in his chair like someone had popped his tires. Furthermore, the judge added, the court is deeply disturbed by the attempted concealment of the decedent's journal. The matter is being referred to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. You could hear a pin drop. I didn't look at Darlene. I didn't need to. The judge turned to me. Ms. Hart, the will is upheld in full. The estate and heirlooms pass entirely to you as stated. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just closed my eyes and exhaled. It was over. Or so I thought. A week later, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a short note, written in a shaky hand. Rachel, I know I've done unforgivable things. But you should know, when you were born, I wanted to hold you more than anyone. Your grandmother just beat me to it. I was never angry at you. Only myself. Darlene, I sat with the letter for a long time. I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in making peace. Not yet. But something shifted in me again. This time, it wasn't about justice. It was about choice. So here's what I did next. I took the inheritance, the house, the heirlooms, the accounts, and I didn't hoard them. I donated Grandma's antique china to a women's shelter. She would have liked that. I sold a few valuables and used the money to launch a small nonprofit for elderly caregivers. People like me, who've been pulled into caring for someone they love and had no clue how to navigate it. I called it Margaret's Hands. And the house. I moved into it, but not alone. I invited Thomas, my grandfather, to visit. He stayed for a week, then 2. Then he moved into the guest house. I got to know the man Grandma had loved before everything fell apart. He tells me stories now about her as a young woman, about my mom, about things Darlene never let us hear. And when we sit on the porch in the evening, he always says the same thing. She picked right, Rachel. Don't ever doubt it. I never wanted to fight over an inheritance. I just wanted to honor my grandmother's truth and protect the bond we had. Darlene thought being family gave her rights to everything. But what she didn't understand is this. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up, stay honest, and love you without conditions. And that, more than anything Grandma ever left me, is what I carry forward every single day.